Chapter 1. Shadows over Europe. It started quietly, like a cold wind at the edge of a door. The news came in short sentences. Tensions rising, troops moving, warnings growing louder. At first, people didn't notice. They went to work. They took their children to school. They made dinner, watched shows, fell asleep. But something had changed. Across Europe, a feeling was spreading, a heavy feeling, like something unseen was pressing down. In Brussels, a young teacher named Emma watched the morning news with her coffee in hand. Her baby slept in the next room. On the screen, a map showed red arrows near the eastern borders. She didn't understand every detail, but she didn't need to. She felt it. "Is something coming?" she whispered to no one. In Warsaw, people lined up for fuel, quietly, calmly, but with urgency. One man looked at the sky. A plane passed overhead. Was it going somewhere important, or just passing by? No one knew for sure. Governments spoke carefully. "We are watching the situation closely. There is no need to panic." But panic isn't always loud. Sometimes it's silent. It lives in the eyes, in the way people check their phones again and again, in the quiet between neighbors who don't know what to say. In Spain, a bakery owner turned the radio up while kneading dough. Military activity has increased. He stopped, flour on his hands, and looked out the window. The sun still shone, but it felt colder than before. In Italy, a university student called her mother in the middle of the night. "Are we safe?" Her mother didn't answer at first. Then came a small voice. "We are together. That's what matters." Across the continent, the questions began. What does this mean? Where is this going? Is Europe walking into something we can't stop? In Berlin, train stations were full of quiet footsteps. People moved normally, almost, but many carried small bags, backpacks, not suitcases, just enough for one night, just in case. At embassies, lights stayed on late into the night. Officials made phone calls. Meetings stretched into the early hours. Maps were studied. Histories remembered. Words chosen carefully. But outside those rooms, the air felt different. Shadows were growing. Not the kind made by clouds or trees, but the kind made by fear, by memory, by the long, cold history of Europe's past. In Prague, an old man walked by the river. He had seen this before. Not the same, but close. He remembered the sound of sirens, the quiet before the radio went dark, the way cities can change overnight. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Please, not again." In Sweden, a school changed its lesson plans. The children were too young to understand war, but they could feel when their teachers were scared. They asked, "Why are there soldiers on the news?" The teacher smiled gently and said, "They're trying to keep us safe." But inside, her heart was shaking. People began to talk, in cafes, in kitchens, on late-night calls. They didn't speak in full sentences, just fragments. "My cousin's unit moved east. The government said not to worry, but do you think we'll have to leave?" Not all felt fear. Some felt anger. Others, confusion. And some felt something else. Responsibility. To speak. To stay calm. to prepare, to hope. In Vienna, a journalist sat at his desk, surrounded by headlines. He knew this story wasn't simple. It never is. But he also knew stories shape the world. And this one needed truth, not panic. He wrote slowly. Something is shifting in Europe, not just on maps, but in hearts. Across cities and towns, the wind is changing. The question now is what comes next. Outside, the lights of the city flickered on. Shadows danced across windows. People lit candles, turned on radios, locked their doors. It wasn't war. Not yet. But the feeling was there. Waiting. Watching. And as the night fell across Europe, the world held its breath. Chapter 2. The Warning Signs. The signs were there. Not loud, not clear, but they were growing. It began with words, careful words. Words chosen like glass, delicate and sharp. In press rooms and parliaments, leaders stood before cameras. They spoke calmly. We are watching the situation. There is no immediate danger. Our people must stay united. But behind the calm words were worried eyes. In the halls of Brussels, quiet meetings stretched long into the night. Maps were laid out on tables, red lines, blue pins, unknowns. A diplomat in a dark suit whispered, "We're running out of time, but we still don't know what we're running toward." Across Europe, something had begun to move. Trucks filled with fuel, trains carrying tanks, ships in northern ports loading supplies. In Norway, a fisherman saw something strange as he pulled in his nets. 3 gray ships on the horizon. He stood still, the cold wind brushing his face. He didn't wave. They didn't wave back. In Hungary, a train carrying soldiers passed through a quiet town. Children stood at the tracks. Some waved, others just watched. No one told them where the train was going. No one needed to. The soldiers' faces said enough. In the forests of Lithuania, new tents appeared. Campfires flickered in the snow. Men and women walked in formation, practicing drills. Preparing? But for what? Some said it was routine. Just exercises. A show of strength. But it didn't feel routine. Not to the people living nearby. Not to the young couple who packed a bag, just in case. Not to the grandmother who checked the news every hour. Something was shifting. In the UK, Parliament grew tense. Lawmakers raised their voices. Some called for stronger defense. Others warned of escalation. All of them uncertain. In Paris, the president gave a speech at midnight. Behind him, the French flag moved softly. He said, "France will protect its people." But his hands shook slightly as he turned the page. At home, a woman named Claire watched from her kitchen. Her teenage son leaned on the table, listening. He asked, "Do you think there will be war?" Claire looked at him, and for a moment she didn't answer. Then she said, "I hope not. But we must be ready for anything." In Slovakia, farmers noticed more helicopters overhead. In Denmark, old shelters were checked and repaired. In Poland, schools quietly practiced emergency drills. The word readiness became common. On the radio, on television, in people's mouths. But readiness comes with a cost. A woman in Estonia looked at her savings. Food prices had gone up again. She used to buy coffee each morning. Now she walks past the cafe. A small sacrifice, but it felt bigger somehow. In Germany, protests began in city squares. People held signs. Some said, "No to war." Others said, "Defend Europe." They stood side by side, but their hearts beat to different drums. Not all warning signs come from the military. Some are in the rhythm of daily life, in the quiet shelves of supermarkets, in the questions children ask, in the way people walk faster, speak softer, check the time more often. The world was watching. From the United States, from Asia, from everywhere. What would Europe do? Would it break under pressure? Would it fight back? Would it find peace? No one knew. Not even the leaders behind the microphones. And that was the scariest part. In a small Swiss town, a church bell rang as snow fell. Inside, an old man lit a candle. He didn't speak. He just watched the flame. Outside, a family walked past in silence. The youngest child looked up and asked, "Why do people keep talking about war?" The mother knelt down, kissed his cheek, and whispered, "Because they're afraid." And maybe, just maybe, admitting fear is the first step to understanding it. As night came again across Europe, lights flickered in bedrooms and bunkers. Soldiers tightened their boots, families locked their doors, leaders practiced their next speech. Everyone waited. The warning signs were no longer whispers. They were footsteps. Getting closer. Chapter 3. Borders on Edge. At the edge of Europe, life is holding its breath. Small towns near the borders are changing. Not loudly, not quickly, but deeply. In Latvia, near the eastern edge, Anna walks to her local shop. She sees a soldier standing outside the post office, not smiling, not speaking, just watching. Anna nods politely, but inside, her stomach tightens. That soldier wasn't there last week. Overhead, helicopters cut through the sky. The sound is sharp. It makes windows shake. Children look up, eyes wide. In Romania, trucks move slowly along country roads, long, heavy, covered in gray tarps. No one says what's inside, but everyone guesses. At a gas station near the Hungarian border, a man fills his tank, then 2 red containers. He glances around, then drives away quickly. He doesn't want to explain. In villages near Ukraine, people check the news every hour. Their phones buzz again and again. Rumors, questions, worry. A teenager named Victor sits on the steps of his school. He looks at the road. Nothing comes, but he keeps watching. Is it safer to leave? He asks his father that night. His father doesn't answer right away. Then he says, "Where would we go?" That question repeats across borders. Where would we go? The roads near checkpoints grow busier, not with tourists, not with families going on holiday, but with trucks, military vehicles, and people who are just not sure. At night, lights move across the hills. They used to be stars. Now they are searchlights. In Slovakia, an old woman named Zora bakes bread before sunrise. It's an old habit from long ago, from another time when soldiers came too close. She remembers how people shared what little they had. Now, she leaves a loaf on her neighbor's doorstep, just in case. The air feels different near borders, heavier, as if the land itself knows what's coming. At a cafe in Estonia, the radio plays music, software slow. But behind the counter, the barista checks the door often. A customer whispers, "Do you think they'll cross?" No answer. Just a sip of coffee, a pause, a sigh. In Poland, a teacher speaks to her class about geography, but the students ask about borders instead. They want to know what happens if tanks come, if planes drop bombs, if the classroom becomes a shelter. She tells them, "We are safe now." She smiles, but her hands are cold. In the Czech Republic, a train stops for 15 minutes longer than usual. People on board grow restless. No announcements, just the sound of boots on gravel. Someone says, "They're checking the border again." No one asks why. Everyone already knows. There is no official war, no sirens, no loud attacks. But fear has its own language, and it is spoken clearly in border towns. People prepare in quiet ways. Some pack bags, others fill freezers. Many pray. In a field near the Finnish border, a boy kicks a football toward the forest. It rolls too far. He runs after it and stops. Two men in uniform step out of the trees. They look at him. He looks back, then turns around slowly and walks home. His mother hugs him tightly when he returns. She doesn't ask what happened. She just says, "Stay close." And he does. Across all these edges of Europe, people wait. They listen to helicopters. They watch the roads. They study the faces of soldiers and strangers. And they ask themselves, what's really happening? No one says it out loud, but everyone feels the same truth. The border is no longer just a line on a map. It's a line between peace and something else. And it's getting thinner every day. Chapter 4. Cities in Silence. The cities still stand. Paris, Berlin, Warsaw. Beautiful, proud, alive. But something has changed. Not the buildings, not the people, but the silence. In Paris, the cafe chairs are still out, the bakeries still open, the river still flows, but the laughter is softer, the music quieter, and when people speak, they lower their voices. At the metro station, a woman reads the news on her phone. She scrolls, stops, scrolls again. There are no loud headlines today, but the tension is louder than words. In Berlin, the trains arrive on time. People go to work. They pick up their children. They do their best to act normal. But it's not normal. In shops and offices, people look at each other a little longer. They ask, "Are you okay?" They mean it more than usual. Traffic is slower, not because of cars, but because of thought. Everyone is thinking about what's happening, what might come. In Warsaw, the streets are clean and quiet. Posters on the walls show the national flag. Some say, "Stay strong," others say nothing at all. A bus drives past a group of school children. They wave at the driver. He waves back, but his smile fades fast. He's thinking about his son. He's of age, and in these times, that means something different now. At a street market, a man sells vegetables. His prices are higher than last week. He doesn't explain. No one asks. Everyone knows the supply trucks are slower. Some are being used for other things now. In Paris, a young woman named Leah walks home with headphones in. The music helps, but when she hears the sound of sirens, not emergency, just traffic, she jumps. She tells herself it's nothing. But later, she puts a flashlight and passport into her backpack, just in case. In Berlin, an artist paints a large canvas in her small flat. The colors are dark, black, gray, deep red. It's not the piece she wanted to paint, but it's the one she had to paint. She says, "I needed to get the fear out of my hands." Across the continent, people live their days. They smile, they talk, they keep going. But something invisible has entered the cities. Something no one invited. Fear. It moves between buildings. It waits in corners. It rides the train, walks the streets, sits in cafes. You can't see it, but you can feel it everywhere. In Warsaw, a journalist speaks to the camera. He stands near a government building. He says, "Poland is preparing for many outcomes. We hope for peace, but we prepare for all things." Behind him, someone holds a child's hand tightly. That small gesture says more than the words. In Berlin, a musician plays in an underground station. The tune is sad, soft, beautiful. People drop coins into his case. No one speaks, but many stop to listen. Just for a moment, just to feel something kind. In Paris, a couple sits on a bench in silence. They don't look at their phones. They don't look at each other. They just sit. One of them finally says, "Do you think it's going to happen?" The other replies, "I don't know, but I don't want to miss this sunset." Sometimes the fear is loud, like a voice inside your head. Other times it's quiet, like the way people walk home faster. But no matter how it speaks, it's there. Europe's great cities have seen war before. They have memories in their stones, stories in their walls. But this time, the fear is not in ruins or fire. It's in the waiting, in the wondering. How close is too close? How long can peace hold? What would I do if the sirens sound tomorrow? These questions sit in cafes. They ride the trams. They lie awake at night. The cities remain. Still beautiful. Still full of life. But under the surface, they are whispering, and the silence says everything. Chapter 5. The New Normal. Change does not always arrive like thunder. Sometimes it comes quietly, through receipts, through small choices, through things that suddenly feel unfamiliar. Across Europe, life is still moving, but it no longer feels the same. In Barcelona, a mother stands at a petrol station. She watches the numbers climb faster than before. 20 euros, 25, 30. She shakes her head, puts the pump back. "Just enough to get home," she whispers. In Prague, The shelves in her favorite supermarket are still full, but not in the way they used to be. There is less variety, fewer fresh fruits, more canned goods. A small sign near the eggs says, "Limit 2 per customer." She didn't expect this. Nobody really did. In Finland, a boy named Ardo eats breakfast in silence. His father folds a newspaper beside him. No one speaks. Until Ardo says, "Are we still going to the lake this summer?" His father looks at him, then at the paper, and finally says, "We'll see." That means no. Across Europe, the future has become softer, hazier, unsure. People still plan, but more carefully. In Italy, a student named Luca meets his friends at a bar. They don't talk about school, they talk about borders, about the army, about leaving. One of them has a cousin in another country. Another is looking at job offers far away. Luca listens. He stirs his drink. He doesn't say it out loud, but he wonders if he should leave too. What would you do if you were his age? Would you stay or go? In Belgium, a woman checks her daughter's backpack before school. She adds a flashlight, some tissues, a tiny pack of food. The bag is heavier than it used to be. Not just because of supplies, but because of fear. In Germany, a retired couple keeps their radio on all day. The voices comfort them. Even when the news isn't good, it's better than silence. They water their plants, make coffee, watch the street from their window. And they wait. Not for anything specific, just for the feeling to pass, but it hasn't passed. In Warsaw, families speak in the kitchen about more than dinner. They talk about who might stay, who might go, and how fast they could pack if they had to. One mother keeps passports in a folder by the door, just in case. In Sweden, a university adds a new class, How to Prepare in Times of Crisis. It fills up quickly. Students take notes on things they never thought they'd study. Water storage, emergency kits, evacuation routes. They laugh sometimes, nervously, because this doesn't feel like real life. And yet, it is. Shops have signs now. Due to recent events. Please be patient. Thank you for understanding. People nod. They don't ask questions. Everyone understands more than they say. In Lisbon, a young man walks past a travel agency. Bright pictures of beaches and cities smile from the window. He stops, looks at a poster that says, "Escape." He almost laughs, not because it's funny, but because it feels like something from another world. Vacations, plans, comfort, all of it. Quieter now. Across Europe, people are not panicking. They're adjusting, learning new habits, saving more, reading the news with sharper eyes, looking at maps not for fun, but for understanding. The change is not loud, but it is deep, and it touches everything. Some people grow closer to their neighbors. Others stay quiet, not out of coldness, but from caution. In Denmark, a child draws a picture of their family. There are 3 houses, 2 cars, 1 big question mark in the corner. The teacher looks at it and says nothing. But later, She lights a candle at home. Because even hope feels like work these days. This is the new normal. It didn't arrive in one day. It won't leave in one either. And as Europe walks forward, step by step, people carry something invisible with them. A mix of fear, courage, and a quiet, growing voice inside that asks, what will tomorrow bring? Chapter 6, Behind Closed Doors. Not all battles happen on the ground. Some happen in rooms. Quiet rooms, big tables, closed doors. In Brussels, in Berlin, in London, leaders sit under bright lights. They drink cold coffee. Their ties are loose. Their voices are tired. But the tension in the room is sharp, like glass. Maps on the wall, reports in folders, screens flashing with live updates. A woman in a dark suit stands up. She points at the map. This is where things may change, she says. No one speaks. In these meetings, silence can mean agreement or fear. At one end of the table, a man from the north says, we must stay calm, push for peace, every move matters. At the other end, a general shakes his head. Peace is good, but preparation is better. Their eyes meet. Neither one blinks. This is Europe's new rhythm. Words instead of bullets, plans instead of peace. Questions with no easy answers. In Paris, a government advisor closes his laptop. His hands are shaking. He walks to the window and stares out. Below, people move like always. Buses, bikes, children in coats. They don't see the files he just read. They don't know what's being discussed. Should they? In secret rooms, leaders argue over big ideas. How many troops to send, how much support to give, how far to go, without going too far. The problem is, no one agrees on where too far begins. In one meeting, a voice says, we cannot wait for the worst to happen. Another replies, but if we move too fast, we may cause the worst to happen. These are not easy choices. And outside those rooms, people wait. They trust, they hope, but some wonder. In Hungary, a journalist checks his sources. He hears whispers. He hears things that never appear in the papers. He writes carefully. One wrong sentence could cause panic, but one silent sentence could hide the truth. In Sweden, a defense minister returns home late. His wife opens the door. He looks at her and for a moment says nothing. Then he says, it's going to be a long winter. In Warsaw, a room full of advisors looks at a chart. It shows numbers, plans, risks. Someone says, even allies do not trust each other fully. Not now. Trust is thin, like paper held in rain. Old promises are questioned. New alliances are tested. Who will come if we call? Who will stay silent when the time comes? In the halls of power, some want diplomacy. Others push for strength. One says, if we don't act now, we look weak. Another says, if we act too fast, we start what we are trying to stop. And somewhere in the middle, a clock ticks. Because time matters, not just for governments, but for families, for lives. In Denmark, a father watches the news after dinner. He hears the words, "Talks continue," but sees the worried face of the reporter. His daughter asks, "Are they fixing it?" He nods, but the nod is slow. In Estonia, two diplomats speak in a hallway. Their voices are low, their eyes tired. They speak about plans they hope they never have to use. Evacuations, emergency systems, food storage. These are not the topics they studied at university, but now they are daily work. In one meeting room, a leader leans forward and says, "If peace breaks, the world will ask what we did and what we didn't do." The room goes still. Behind every decision is a risk. Behind every delay is a cost. But in the end, decisions must be made. And they are, behind closed doors, with pens, with pressure, with people who understand that history never waits. Outside, the world moves on. Children play. Markets open. Church bells ring. But inside those quiet rooms, the future is being shaped. And no one truly knows what it will become. Chapter 7. Voices of the People. When fear rises, people speak. Not just politicians, not just generals, but farmers, students, mothers, drivers, teachers, you. In every part of Europe, voices are rising. Some are quiet, some are loud. All of them matter. In a village in southern France, a farmer named Jules stands beside his field. The soil is ready for planting, but his heart is not. "I've seen war before," he says. "I was a child then. I remember the sound of boots on our road. I don't want my grandchildren to hear it again." He joins a small protest in the town square. A sign in his hand reads, "Choose peace." His hands shake, but his voice is steady. In Sweden, Sophia, a university student, helps organize a public discussion. The posters say, "What does safety mean today?" People sit in a circle. Some speak about fear. Some speak about courage. One girl says, "We must defend what we love." Another replies, "But we must not become what we fear." They listen, they disagree, but they do not shout. Because these days, everyone understands that words are powerful. In Germany, a teacher writes on the board, "What would you do to protect peace?" The class is silent at first. Then, slowly, answers come. I would talk more with people I don't agree with. I would help someone who is afraid. I would be brave. Small voices, big hearts. In Italy, a young man named Marco records a video. He speaks directly into the camera. "I don't want to fight," he says, "but I will protect my family if I have to." The video goes viral. Some people thank him. Others call him weak. But Marco doesn't reply. He has said what he needed to say. In Greece, an old woman lights a candle in a church. She remembers her husband, lost in a war long ago. She closes her eyes. Her lips move with a prayer, not for victory, not for strength, but for peace. Not everyone agrees. In Estonia, a group of volunteers trains in the snow. They learn how to move in silence, how to carry heavy packs, how to be ready. One of them, Elena, says, "Peace is not just hoping. Peace is preparing." She is 22. Her hands are red from the cold. Her eyes are sharp with purpose. In Spain, workers gather in a union hall. They talk about jobs, food prices, fear, and about how conflict could change everything. "We work for bread," one man says. "We do not want war, but we will not be quiet if war takes our bread away." In the Netherlands, a father speaks at a community meeting. His voice shakes. "My son is 18. He should be learning, not worrying about conscription." Another parent nods. Another disagrees. The room is full. No one has easy answers, but they listen. Across Europe, the people are speaking, in languages and accents, in speeches and songs, in whispers and marches. In Warsaw, thousands walk in silence, carrying candles. Some wear signs, "We remember, never again." A child walks beside his mother. He asks, "Why are we walking?" She squeezes his hand and says, "To show we care." And still, other voices call for strength. In Romania, a woman in uniform speaks at a local school. She says, "We train not because we want war, but because we must protect peace." The students watch her closely. Some smile, some frown. All of them understand more than they did yesterday. These are the voices of the people. Not one voice, but many. Different opinions, different fears, different dreams. But underneath it all, the same deep question. What kind of world will we wake up to tomorrow? In the middle of the noise, there is something beautiful. Not certainty, not answers, but care. Care for family, for land, for history, for the future. These voices may not decide what happens, but they remind us why it matters. Because Europe is not just made of countries, it is made of people. People who are speaking now. Before it's too late. Chapter 8. A Sudden Spark. Sometimes it takes only one moment. Not a war. Not a battle. Just a spark. And suddenly, everything feels ready to burn. It began early, before sunrise, before coffee, before schools opened. A border patrol near the east reported something unusual. Loud sounds, lights in the dark. Then, an explosion. No one was sure what caused it. Some said it was a warning. Others said it was a mistake. But within minutes, the world was watching. The news came fast. Faster than truth could catch it. Screens lit up. Phones buzzed. Voices grew louder. In a newsroom in Berlin, a reporter looked at a map. The red dot blinked. She turned to the camera and said, "There has been an incident. We don't yet know the full story, but tensions are high." That was all it took. In Warsaw, traffic slowed. People turned up their radios. A woman on the bus whispered, "Is this it?" In Brussels, politicians were pulled from meetings. Doors closed. Phones rang. A man stood up and said, "We must not act too fast." Another replied, "But what if this is fast enough?" Panic doesn't always shout. Sometimes it moves quietly. In the eyes of a shop owner who closes early. In the hands of a mother who packs extra clothes into a bag. In Stockholm, a school locked its gates. Just for the day, they said. Just for safety. But the children knew something was wrong. They looked at the sky, at their teachers, at each other. One girl asked, "Is there going to be a war?" No one answered. In Italy, a man turned off the news and stood in silence. He walked outside. The street was calm, but in his chest, his heart beat faster. He remembered a story his grandfather told about how war comes first in the voice, then in the wind, then in the soil, and he felt all three. At military bases across Europe, orders were given. Planes checked, troops moved, calls made. Not to fight, not yet, but to be ready. In Paris, a journalist read two different versions of the same event. One said it was an accident. One said it was an attack. She sighed. Which one would the people believe? In a cafe nearby, a young man watched the updates on his phone. He typed something quickly, a message to his brother. "If anything happens, meet me at the station." The reply came in seconds. Already packed. In Estonia, a family ate breakfast without speaking. The father looked at the clock, then at his wife. They both nodded. Later that morning, they drove to their aunt's house, far from the city. "Just to visit," they said to the children. But the children knew. This was not just a visit. Across the continent, people made quiet decisions. To fill their cars, to withdraw some cash, to call loved ones. Not because anyone told them to, but because fear moves faster than orders. In London, two analysts stared at a map glowing on a large screen. One traced a line with his finger. He whispered, "If this goes wrong, it could spread." The other nodded. Everything depends on the next 12 hours. 12 hours. That's all? 12 hours to understand what happened. 12 hours to hold back the fire. 12 hours to decide mistake or message. And outside, life went on. Shoppers filled baskets. Dogs barked in parks. Music played on radios. But beneath the normal was something else. Tension. Waiting. The weight of uncertainty. In Vienna, a woman took a deep breath and stepped onto a crowded tram. She looked around. Everyone was quiet. Everyone was thinking the same thing, but no one said it. Is this the beginning? A beginning of what? A war? A peace that holds one final time? No one knew. But something had changed. Not in the streets, not in the sky, but in the heart. The spark had landed, and the world was holding its breath. Chapter 9. Holding On. Even when the world feels heavy, people still reach for light. The headlines are still tense, the questions still hang in the air. But under the surface, something else begins to grow. Hope. Not loud, not easy, but real. In Krakow, Poland, a bakery stays open an extra hour every evening. The owner, Marek, gives away unsold bread. He doesn't ask for thanks. One evening, an older woman takes a loaf and says softly, "I used to feed others. Now it's me." "Thank you." He smiles. No words needed. In Spain, two neighbors who never spoke before begin sharing shopping trips. One has a car. The other knows where to find cheaper groceries. Together, they laugh. Not much, but enough. In Finland, a boy makes paper hearts at school. He writes one word on each. Peace. He puts them on windows, one by one. By the end of the week, his whole street joins in. It doesn't stop the fear, but it makes it softer. In Austria, a woman named Clara organizes a food drive. She posts flyers. She knocks on doors. Soon, people arrive with bags, pasta, rice, baby food. One man says, "I don't have much, but I have enough to share." And that is more than enough. Across Europe, communities grow stronger, not because everything is fine, but because people know it might not be. In Romania, a teacher invites students to write poems instead of essays. She says, "Tell me how you feel." No grades, just honesty. The poems are short, simple, powerful. One reads, "I feel scared, but my mother holds my hand." That makes it better. In a small Dutch town, the church bell rings at 8 every night. Not for service, not for warning, but for unity. People step outside. They wave to each other. Some light candles. The silence between them speaks louder than words. In Germany, a musician plays on her balcony. Each evening, the same song. The neighbors wait for it now. They lean out their windows. They listen. One night, someone sings along, then another. And for 3 minutes, there is music in the sky. In Croatia, a doctor works long shifts at the hospital. She is tired, worried, but every morning a stranger leaves a flower on her windshield. No note, just kindness. And that keeps her going. Even online, where fear can spread like fire, something else appears. Messages of hope, videos of support, photos of children drawing maps with hearts instead of borders. One post goes viral. A picture of 2 hands, one blue, one yellow, holding each other. The caption says, "We are stronger together." And people believe it. In Belgium, a family offers a room in their home to a friend from a neighboring country. They share meals, stories, laughter. The children play as if the world isn't changing. And for a moment, it isn't. In Lithuania, an old man repairs bikes for free. He doesn't speak much. He just nods and works. One child says, "I think he's fixing more than bikes." Sometimes, the darkest days bring out the brightest lights. Because when war threatens the edge of daily life, people hold each other tighter. Not out of weakness, but out of strength. And not everyone is afraid. In Slovakia, a young woman trains with volunteers. She carries supplies, takes first aid lessons, helps organize emergency plans. She says, "If something comes, I want to help, not hide." In Ireland, a group of teenagers starts a podcast. They talk about peace. They share stories from across Europe. They invite others to speak. One guest says, "We may be young, but we are not powerless." And he's right. The world hasn't broken. Not yet. Maybe not ever. And even if it does, there will be people who carry each other through. Because hope is not an idea. It is a choice. A small act. A quiet word. A warm meal. A steady voice in the dark. These are the things that hold us together. And right now, across cities, towns, and borders, people are holding on. To love. To each other. To the belief that peace is still possible. Chapter 10. What comes next? The world holds its breath. Again. The fighting hasn't started. The fear hasn't gone. But something new begins. Talks. Around large tables, under high ceilings, in quiet rooms, leaders meet. They shake hands. They sit down. And they begin to speak. Not about victory. Not about power. But about peace. Across Europe, people wait. In hospitals, in schools, in train stations and kitchens and city streets. They check the news. They listen for updates. They ask the question that no one can answer yet. Is it over? Or is it just beginning? In Geneva, journalists gather outside a tall building. Flags move gently in the wind. Cameras flash. A woman speaks into a microphone. Peace talks have begun, but trust is low. Tension is high, and the outcome is unclear. In Berlin, a man watches from his phone. He sits alone in a cafe. His coffee goes cold. In Warsaw, a group of students discuss the news in class. One says, "This is our last chance." Another replies, "No, it's our first." Hope and fear live side by side now, like strangers sharing a bench. In Spain, a grandmother lights a candle and places it in the window. She doesn't say why. She doesn't need to. In Sweden, a soldier packs his bag. He has not been called, but he wants to be ready, just in case. What does ready even mean now? Across Europe, borders feel less like lines and more like open wounds. Still, some people believe, not in promises, but in possibility. In France, a teacher writes on the board, "What does peace look like to you?" The answers are simple. A warm meal. A father home from duty. A sky without planes. In Romania, a woman stands in her shop doorway and watches the street. She remembers how quiet it was a week ago. Today, people are moving again, not laughing, not celebrating, but walking, talking, living. It's a start. At the peace talks, voices rise. There is anger, history, old pain. But also listening. Not everyone listens with open hearts, but some do. And that is enough to begin. In Brussels, a diplomat says, "We are not here to win. We are here to prevent loss." And everyone knows what that means. In Lisbon, a couple cancels their backup plan. They unpack their emergency bags, put clothes back in drawers. They sit together at the table and hold hands. The silence between them feels different now. Not heavy, but light. Not everyone believes. Some say the talks are a trick, a delay, a way to buy time. Some think peace is just a pause. But even pauses matter. Even one more day without war is one more chance to choose something better. In Denmark, a small girl draws on the floor. She shows her mother the picture. Two people shaking hands. She says, "They're not fighting anymore." Her mother smiles and cries at the same time. That's what this moment is, both things, hope and fear, love and worry, a future and a shadow. In Estonia, a journalist ends her report with a single sentence. No one knows what will happen next, but today there is a door, and it is open. The door may not stay open. It may close again. But right now, it's there. And that matters. In every country, every city, every home, people are watching that door. Some in silence, some with prayers, some with tears, some with arms still ready, but all of them waiting to see if this fragile moment becomes something stronger. Peace is not made in one day. It is made in choices, in listening, in holding on. So now, the question returns. What comes next? War? Peace? A long road in between? No one knows. Not yet. But the choice is still open, still possible, still ours.